Aleksandr Nevalenny на экран.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am pleased to be present at this event. I'll be speaking in Russian. My presentation is in English. You will see that I am going to speak about IPv6 protocol. It is more than 20 years that we are using them. It is discussed largely. We can see the recent updates, proposals about this protocol, and what is the further development is proposed. Let's start with what are the actual troubles for the internet today. Maybe you all know that we have a criminal environment in the internet. We have different content of unclear content, including pornographic, the new era of cyber terrorism, and we have to talk not about just some criminal actions, but criminal terrorism when power plant is taken out of operation, and of course legal issues, because many crimes are performed as a trans-border crimes. For example, proxy servers are put in chain and they are become the object of attack. Everybody knows about Tor system, what sites are present there, and why troubles cannot be resolved. IPv6 has quite a very small pool of addresses, and NAT technology is used, and this technology is based on anonymous actions of abuses, and the abuses are not punished after their illicit activities. So the police of different countries spent a lot of time, efforts, and money to identify and catch some criminals, and it takes sometimes 5 to 10 years, at least 2 to 5 years, if the abuser is very cautious and his behavior is very cautious on the internet. And what about IPv6? At every conference, we keep on talking about the necessity of this standard. IPv4 is out of date, is obsolete. IPv6 was developed 20 years ago. What are we waiting for? Actually, not everybody knows how to use the hardware for IPv6, and many people are scared of this. What are the advantages? I'm talking about not the technical side, but what can we use actually. It is a great pool of addresses which can allow us to refuse from net technology. It is the main advantage. The second advantage is the using of IPv6 prefix for the countries, cities, and users is much wider, and of course it is very and slug mechanism is very effective, which allows to add MAC address and efficiently adjust the equipment. It would allow to identify the criminals in the internet. And like in the previous slide, I was talking about IPv6 prefix and the possibility of distribution of IP address according to local identity. For example, for Ukraine is 380. We can do the same with IP addresses. Many have asked me, why should we do that? We have the telephony world, the internet world, let them exist separately. But basically, it is the local addressing are important because we are shifting to the era when the concept of things and every equipment will have its own IP address, and it could be accessible from any point in the world, whether it is your relative, for example, who went to some other country, and you should be able to have access to this static equipment to get knowledge about the status of this man, and bring you our device technology. I also added it is for some employers. It is very popular when the employees bring their own equipment and use it in the operations. So technically, it is very flexible system and efficient at the same time. Going back to the specifics of IPv6, we also face the Slack technology when addresses are generated automatically. Why do we need it for DHCSP v6? Slack is really needed when we are talking about for the primary issues of the number. But it could be used as additional instrument which could show us the information about DNS server. And when we talk about the safe internet, it involves not only safe technical basis, but also the organizational, the arrangement. According to the author, the internet should be regulated by, for example, ICANN, and some unified police like Interpol. As I already mentioned, many cyber crimes are made on transborder principle. The chain of service is used as an instrument for the crime. And you probably know that Interpol recently opened a huge center designed to investigate computer crimes. If we realize the idea that was initially expressed, we will decrease anonymous activity, so the criminals would not be able to use proxy service for their illegal activities, and there will be the efficiency of investigations would increase because it would be clear how to identify the end user. And
and there will be a reduced amount of content that I mentioned before. Of course, there are certain concerns, even myths, that if something is implemented, that things will go wrong. Of course, it's very natural for people to be afraid of new things, to people to come up all sorts of new fears. But without services such as Tor, ITP, private life, the people are afraid of being too much exposed to that their private life will be investigated, but this will never happen like this. And of course, part of the data can be coded. There is a concern that one single regulator will encroach upon the internet independence. However, we have the police, and creating the police is not The idea of the police is not to limit the internet, but to improve its functioning. Also, the concern that if we give up the idea of NAT, there will be no firewalls. And that everyone will have to think about individual protections of protecting their individual device and administer it in a centralized way on the level of a single company. And even if we indicate in the RFC that you cannot use NAT any longer, there's a concern that some people, some companies would still be using it. However, this is not a threat because you can always find out whether somebody is outside of the proxy server. And these are the directions in which we will be going in these activities, outreach and speaking to this issue on all internet forums, working together with IETF. We did have some preliminary discussion, and we had to confront negative attitude on some issues, but the majority of the issues were met with understanding. Working together with ICANN support organizations, their distribution by the local principal, interacting with governmental agencies, to create international agreements such as giving up the NAT, or, for instance, some engineers made an announcement that giving up NAT is against human rights and freedoms because anyone is free to work in any system they choose to, but we need to insist on the main premise that this is not done to intrude on people's privacies, but to create a safe environment. If you have any questions, you're welcome to. Okay, I see two questions in the middle of the room. Can you please bring the mic? Not so much a question, but a comment. I did not quite understand about IPv6 coding. What exactly did you have in mind? If you remember, we were talking about IPsec support, but the same is true for IPv4 as well. Yes, I was referring to the general concept that IPv6 supports the coding automatically. But regardless of this, what I meant was you can always code your messages if you suspect that somebody is spying on you. So whatever you do, you can code it and no one else will be able to read it. My comment has to do with the fact that the same is applicable to IPv4 as much as IPv6. Then the automation of IPv6, there is IPv6 privacy. Yes, there's also temporary readdressing in IPv6 so that this could be followed and spied on in the same way as it is with NAT. This is not being developed now as a technology, but theoretically it could be. And in fact, NAT versus IPv6 I think poses the same issue. Many people, I'm talking about providers, many providers do not want to implement IPv6 for the following reason. There is access using any direct address to any computer, any camera or whatever, and this will give us a surge of DDoSes, botnets. Unfortunately, the slide is not shown anymore, but first thing, we are talking about individual protection for all your equipment. And secondly, what we're talking about here is we can clearly identify the perpetrator. And if they know we can do that, the crime itself will change the crime level. Okay, let's go on to the second question. We need a mic for that.
Member of the ICANN board. Feedback. I sympathize with your relatively dire assessment of the state of the internet now, and we have major problems. We know them. They've been commented on by various people, and we know that we have to solve them one way or the other. However, when you mention the notion of using prefix as a country or a city identifier, are you not changing very fundamentally how blocks of addresses are given right now to ISPs and essentially changing the way in which internet routing will have to be done? There seems to be a contradiction there. That's a comment and a question. So I have a second comment, and that is that when you talk about a major change in the governance of the internet and an ICANN being a regulatory agency, at the moment we coordinate internet identifiers and try to assure the security and stability of the internet with respect to them, but we're not a regulatory agency. Are you not recommending in your steps a fundamental reorganization, almost an upside-down reorganization of the way the internet is governed?
Okay, I will try to answer your question. And about regulation internet, I didn't say anything about ICANN like tracking agency, like you said. But I tried to say that ICANN can take more responsibility about regulation internet, not anymore. About first question. Location, distribution of IP addresses to local countries, for example. In my opinion, it's a second part of denying of NAT. We should use these ones together. It's only my opinion. And I showed my idea for all of us to discuss it. Maybe I'm wrong, like a lot of people can say something wrong. It's only my opinion.
Спасибо. Еще вопрос?
Thank you. Are there more questions? Yes, I saw somebody who also wanted to ask a question, but is not raising their hand anymore. We only have a couple of minutes left. All right. My question is this. I missed your introduction. What organization do you represent? A nuclear research institution in Moscow, MIFI. Why is that important? The fact that I come from Moscow, is this important? Well, this is somewhat important. My first question is, how do you propose to force the perpetrators to stop using proxy servers, Tor, we understand that legal users are not even using all those. You are aiming it at criminals. So this is your idea for forcing the criminals. Let me rephrase it a little bit. Maybe not force them to give it up, but to give them an incentive to stop doing it. All right, let me once again go back to my presentation. As I said before, this is a change proposed in Russia using the possibilities of IPv6 itself and based on international agreements. Are there any other ways of doing it? I saw somebody who has a question, the pink T-shirt. And then I'm afraid we will have to finish with the Q&A because we have 3 more presentations. You mentioned increasing security with the use of IPv6, but you failed to mention that if everyone has their own IP address, suppose you are a security person working at a bank, and I send you a picture to receive all the information I need and paralyze all your electronic devices. The answer, I will know for sure that you are the criminal, you are the perpetrator. How will you find out? Because if you don't use the anonymity technology, I know who you are. How do you know I will not use the anonymity technology? I mentioned before that we are giving up the idea of NAT, and NAT is underlying the majority of anonymity technologies. I disagrey. You can still use the chaining technology. Okay, I heard you. Tor browser is another example. Unfortunately, we have very little time.